Sealer's banner is almost done, and the next banner after hers is going to be Jing Yuan. Before Starter launched, I watched gameplay here and there, and throughout most of them, Jing Yuan was the character I was most interested in, purely because of how over the top his abilities looked. A lot of that was because of this thing, his Lightning Lord. But is it worth to summon for him right now? Before we discuss that in a bit more detail, if you want to see more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Putting his design and looks aside for a while, what can Jing Yuan actually do? Basically, he's a lightning erudition character, meaning he focuses more on AoE damage and excels at fighting bigger groups of enemies. His kit is actually quite easy to understand. His skill does damage to all enemies and increases the Lightning Lord action counter by 2. I'll talk about what that is when we get to his talent. His ultimate does basically the same thing. It does damage to all enemies and increases the action counter by 3. So on the surface, his kit is generally very simple, but his talent is where the Lightning Lord and action counters I keep talking about comes back into the picture. Everything about Jing Yuan revolves around his Lightning Lord, which is this giant armored stand-looking thing. At the start of any fight, the Lightning Lord is added into the sequence of turns, as though it's its own character. All of Jing Yuan's abilities revolves around buffing the Lightning Lord before it takes its action. That's basically the gist of it. So each time you use his skill or ultimate, an action counter goes up to a maximum of 10, and after the Lightning Lord takes its actions, it resets back to 3, which is its base value. To put it simply, at the start of the fight, the Lightning Lord has 3 action points. If you use your skill and ultimate, the counter goes up by 5 for a total of 8. For each action point, the Lightning Lord gets a speed buff of 10. Long story short, the more skills and ultimate Jing Yuan uses, the faster the Lightning Lord will have its turn. When the Lightning Lord finally gets its turn, you are treated to one of the most satisfying follow-up attacks, at least to me, in the game. The Lightning Lord basically thrusts its ginormous spear or guandao into the ground, dealing a percentage of Jing Yuan's attack to one enemy and a bit lesser damage to the adjacent enemies. And that's basically his kit. You try to get out as many skills and ultimates as possible in a turn to accelerate the Lightning Lord, who comes in and then just decimates whatever hasn't died. So back to the question, is he worth summoning for? In terms of positives, Jing Yuan is somewhat of a direct upgrade to Serval. The difference is that because his damage scaling is so good, at least during the closed beta tests, he does a lot of damage to practically everything. So whether it's a group or a single target, it doesn't really matter, as he can perform well in either scenarios, assuming his scalings are untouched. Of course, he can't compete in single target with someone like Sealer or Yanqing, who are designed specifically for that, but if you have neither of those characters, then his damage will still be a force to be reckoned with. So I feel that as a 5-star DPS, he's a bit more versatile in terms of damage if you choose to get him, since he can do both single target and AoE reasonably well. On top of that, as I explained, his kit is really easy to understand. There's not a lot of conditions or setup you need to prepare for, just literally use his skill and ultimate whenever possible and you're all set. That said, there are a few things that may reduce his value just by a bit. Firstly is that the Lightning Lord is only active if Jing Yuan himself is still active. If Jing Yuan dies or even gets crowd controlled, the Lightning Lord does not act, which significantly reduces the output of damage he can do overall. The consideration of whether to summon for him or not isn't even related to Jing Yuan himself, but rather the banners that are coming right after. If you're free to play, you will likely have around 100 or so summons saved up by now, if you have skipped Sealer's banner and have completed most of the story. That basically means one guaranteed 5-star assuming you win the 50-50, but in 1.1, there are 2 characters that can be considered pretty good. As some of you may know, in 1.1, we're getting both Silver Wolf and Luocha. I won't go into their kits too deeply as they haven't been officially announced, but both these characters are support characters, which generally last longer than DPS ones. On top of that, they are really good support characters, with one of them being a healer, something most players are likely lacking unless you lucked out on a Bailu. So if you're free to play, you kinda have to choose between these 3 characters, and that's where the choice becomes difficult. Just as a side note, Jing Yuan's banner is also stacked with a bunch of 4 stars that are really good, although fishing for 4 stars isn't generally recommended. At the end of the day, I think that this will largely depend more on the characters you currently have. If you already have a reliable DPS, or better, a 5-star one, I'd argue you don't really need an AoE character, at least in this point in the game. Serval can fill most of those needs in general, though as I mentioned, Jing Yuan is far more powerful than she is. There's also the 2 characters in 1.1 to consider, and generally, summoning for support characters is more useful long term since they tend to have better longevity, whereas DPS characters can get power crept pretty often. If you're talking only about a general DPS character that can perform reasonably well in single target and AoE, I would say Jing Yuan is a pretty good choice overall. I personally will be summoning for those in 1.1 as I already have decent DPS characters built, but don't let me get in your way if you really want to go for Jing Yuan. I think he's still a really good character. Truth be told, if it weren't for the characters in 1.1, I would likely have summoned Jing Yuan over Sile as well. So make the decision on what's better for you, and if you like him purely for his appearance or design, then don't let me convince you otherwise. Jing Yuan is an overall great character to have in your roster, but whether you absolutely need him or not depends on you. Good luck on your pulls, and I'll see you in the next video. As usual, have a nice day.